Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining another Lead Squared webinar. We are back again with a session specifically for folks in the healthcare space. So I have a fabulous panel with me and I'll get a little into that in a bit. So we are talking about why patient experience is the new competitive edge. Lots to learn from here, lots to learn from the speakers rather. They come with a lot of experience. I'll start with Dr. Hari Prasad. He is the group chairman and non-executive director at Quality Care India Limited. With over 3 decades in healthcare, Dr. Hari Prasad has been a key force in shaping emergency medicine and hospital management in India. He has led large-scale hospital operations at Apollo and Care Hospitals. Looking forward to learning from you, sir. Now
Pleasure.
we move on to Vikram Bora, who is the CEO of Sabka Dentist. So Vikram is a healthcare leader with more than 25 years of experience in scaling patient-focused solutions. So as the CEO of Sabka Dentist, he is passionate about making healthcare more accessible and ensuring seamless patient experiences across hospital walls. Now, last but not the least, we have our very own Preetham Kumar, who is the SVP of Business Consulting at Lead Squared. He also comes with 25 years of experience and he is passionate about helping organizations solve their sales problems and accelerate growth. So, of late, Preetham has really worked very closely with multiple healthcare providers and is here to share his experience with us. So with that, I will hand it over to Preetham to take the show ahead. A quick tip to the audience here. If you feel like sharing any comments, questions, please feel free to share it on the chat tab. We will take it up ahead once the discussion is over. I know some of you have also sent us questions beforehand. So that is also something we will take at the end of the session. So over to you, Preetham.
All right. Thanks, Shivani. Good afternoon, Dr. Hari and Dr. Vikram.
Good
Lovely
afternoon.
to host you here, and good afternoon to everyone on the call. Yeah. So the topic of the discussion today is patient experience, and this is a really interesting conversation considering the context of the technological advancement we have today. And what I've seen is India as a country has really evolved over last decade or so in terms of development of the whole healthcare ecosystem, right? And I come from city of Tatas, basically Jamshedpur, and which was one of the most, I would say, developed cities in the country. And I still remember when I was growing up, people used to go to Calcutta or AIMS Delhi and Vellore for critical care, right? And fast forward today, the penetration of hospitals, clinic, pharmacies have significantly increased compared to the 90s. Now, while penetration of the hospitals, clinic, etc., across tier three cities and villages remain a top agenda for leaders like Dr. Hari and Vikram. But I think what has come into the mix today is the patient experience, and in some sense, it is becoming a important differentiator in healthcare space. And obviously, that requires a lot of significant investment, right? So the question is, uh, how much investment to make, where to make, how's business outcome getting impacted, and those are the things which we really wanted to talk about. So, I mean, happy to start the conversation. Doctor, if I may request, what's your view on, how overall patient experience is emerging and becoming, part of, I would say, the boardroom agenda, right? And becoming a sort of a growth driver and becoming part of, your growth strategy.
Yeah, thank you for having me on this platform, and it's such a pleasure to be here and to talk about a topic which is very close to my heart because I have seen it evolve over decades.
Right.
And let's make no mistake: the patient comes to the hospital, and the
Right.
primary goal is to get well soon and get out of the hospital as soon as possible. That was the goal 40 years ago. That was the goal 20 years ago, and that's the goal today also. And all the technology, medical, the human skills of doctors and medical professionals, and multiple other things is making it much faster. The heart patient diagnosis is much better. The treatment options are better. They're getting out of the hospital much faster. Like I remember in a multi-specialty tertiary care hospital, average length of stay of a patient used to be about 8 or 9 days. and now it's come to less than 4 days, even in a hospital which is performing complex surgeries.
Right.
So all this is happening, and while the medical front is improving continuously, the same sort of technology is available in every hospital. Skill sets, doctors are getting trained, so the same skill sets are available in many of the hospitals. And in the past, I guess it was the for a long, long time, it was the skill sets of the doctor, the trust in a doctor, and the outcomes of a doctor, which were the differentiators. And then slowly, technology got added to it, and technology also started becoming a differentiator for a hospital. But now, I mean, with the capital that's being infused and with the skill sets that are available today, I think these two are no more differentiators. A new differentiator is now evolving and actually evolved in some form, which is the experience of a patient who's visiting the hospital. So if you actually look at the way we monitor from the top as a leadership, initially it was in terms of the clinical outcomes, the clinical complication rates, and these used to be the metrics which used to be measured for a very, very long time. But now it's apart from the clinical metrics, which continue to be the most important and which continue to be the center of any monitoring mechanism, either at the unit level, the group level, the board level. What is now becoming has become a mainstay is also the service standards. There are multiple ways of measuring the service standards, and hospitals have recognized that the level of service is fast becoming very important as perceived by a patient, and measuring that becomes important. And hospitals are now beginning to develop metrics in using different tools, mostly coming from non-healthcare sectors, like the NPS or the patient satisfaction scores or whatever may be the metric that you're measuring, are now being reported to the leadership. And that's the importance that patient experience is beginning to gain and has gained in many of the organizations. And I think today it is one of the components of differentiating a hospital and creating an awareness about the differentiation and attracting patients.
That's interesting. So I just wanted to bring two more points, Dr. Hari and Vikram. Maybe Vikram, please react to this. I think there are two important variables in my view. One is the segment of the patient, right? So let's say a patient in a city like Bangalore, where I live in, right? And a patient, let's say, in a city like Indore, let's say, which is tier 2 city, and maybe, patient in Sambalpur, right? I think the definition of patient experience across these three segments, I mean, which I'm actually pivoting to three locations, and which in some sense also talks about the way we live, lifestyle, etc., right? So the definition of this patient experience, I believe, also varies from segment of the patient. And the segmentation of the patient could be based on multiple variables, right? So what do you think about it, right? While obviously the quality of care remains same, whether it's in Bangalore or in Indore or a city like, say, Sambalpur, right? Uh, what do you think? How do you balance it out? Okay, let me bring one more variable to this conversation. And obviously, when we talk about patient experience, obviously this is a function of the capital allocation which you are going to make, right? Because in some sense this is directly proportional, because this will require, as Dr. Hari mentioned, infusion of a lot of capital, right? So how, and obviously that increases in some sense the cost of serving the patient, right? So there is a two variable here. One is the affordability, and second is the patient experience, and obviously in the center we have quality of care. So how do you see these three variables getting balanced out in the ecosystem?
So, Preetham, we've always believed that in our business, and we could extend that to any other healthcare, why healthcare, any wellness business,
Hmm.
healthcare business, or any retail services business, that there are three primary components of any services business of this sort. The
Right.
primary component is, of course, the kind of service that you provide, which is more related to the quality of care in case of healthcare. In our case, in case of wellness, possibly the prognosis that you get at the end of the entire procedure. In case of, let's say, something like a salon, also it's the end of treatment prognosis or end of process prognosis. The second pillar over there is where we call where when we talk about patient experience, and which is what you were mentioning about what does the patient feel when he gets out of that place. And the third and the last part is, of course, affordability, that how much is he going to pay for all this. So these three are linked in a very subtle but very important way. While affordability is something that everybody is continuously working on, trying to get the prices down, trying to make things very affordable or easy to pay through EMIs, etc.
Right.
And the first part, which is more or less clinical in nature, it depends on the kind of resources you have, which require investments. So if you want
Mm,
robotics in a particular hospital, you'll have to invest in that kind of infrastructure. You want a specific kind of an experience inside the operatory or inside the room.
mm,
In terms of infra, that requires money. But pure play patient experience, as to what the patient carries out as the soft or emotional aspect of that business,
mhm,
we've always believed that does not require a lot of investments per se. Uh,
mm,
and that is where it kind of all boils down to. We've seen brands which have possibly not invested those kind of. And our clinics are, we are not possibly the best clinics in India. Okay, we don't
mhm,
have the kind of infrastructure that the more luxurious clinics or the more upmarket clinics which you would have in the city would be
mm.
offering. But
Right.
what we definitely believe is that
Mhm,
when a patient walks into a subcarditis clinic, uh, the process that is followed, which is very clearly mapped out on paper in terms of a very clear SOP, is what are the different touch points. At each touch point, what is the typical emotion that the person carries out, and eventually what is the typical positioning that we want in the patient's mind when we
mm,
disengage for a temporary basis. So we never
mm,
disengage completely, because our continuous communication continues even after we complete the treatment. So we stay connected, because dentistry per se is about being connected and increasing awareness and increasing repeat visits in order to ensure that uh,
mhm,
preventive care continues. So I don't think patient experience requires the kind of investments that generally most healthcare company feels. It's more about communication. It's more about the back-end technology that you could be using in order to reduce the cost of possibly conducting a few transactions that are more verbose or uh,
mhm,
more technical in nature. And then, of course, trying to adopt in today's date and time the digital adoption requirement of every patient out there. That also includes patients that are in any tier 2, tier 3 city. If you see the
right.
adoption of digital technology, it's more in tier 2, tier 3 than in tier 1. So, to answer your question, is the patient experience requirement the same across all three cities? We surely believe it does. We get the same expectations even from a Pune. We get the same expectations from a place like Bilaspur also.
That's an interesting perspective, Vikram. And I think it's an interesting point which you brought in terms of how we are treating the patient emotionally while he or she walks in. That's also a very important aspect of overall experience with which they walk away with, after the necessary treatment. So that's an interesting aspect. So, Dr. Ali, I mean, just a related question. I mean, obviously, your hospital group is growing really fast and it has aspirations to grow and accelerate really fast. And I understand from based on the publicly available information, we have now global investors like Blackstone, right, who have landed in India and made significant investment. When it comes to, let's say, global investors walking into our hospital and choosing to make investments, right? So are they also bringing such agenda or perspective from their global experience when, let's say, people like you are talking to such investor that there has to be in some sense focus on driving the patient experience, which essentially in some sense will improve the business outcomes and possibly attribute to revenue as well at some point of time.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, we're living in a global village today.
Right.
And we really can't segment patients based on where they live, whether it's a tier 1, tier 2, or tier 3 city,
Hmm.
because the expectations are set by the brand. Suppose
Hmm.
the next brand puts up a board, whether it's in Chennai or in Bilaspur or Chatti, anywhere, there's a certain expectation that the
Hmm.
brand carries. And what all the brands are trying to do is set an expectation level which is higher than what it used to be in terms of, service level. And as Vikram said, I think the most important part of it is communication.
Right.
The patient and the family needs to feel that they are the most important people on the campus or in the clinic or in the hospital or wherever they are, and they perceive it that way. Unless
Right.
they perceive it that way, I don't think we can really say that we're maintaining a certain standard of service delivery. And the next part of it is, today we're living in a connected world. We're talking about connected healthcare, we're talking about connected medical devices and the rest of it.
Right.
The same thing is now extending into the service quality aspect of it also.
Right.
Being connected with the patient non-clinically to make sure that, just on the dental front or on the cardiac front, to make sure that they're well, or passing on a health tip. All this has an impact on the patient in terms of the perception of the brand and in terms of how the brand is setting expectations for the patient when they walk into a particular hospital. So I genuinely believe that it is a continuous cycle, whether the patient is in the hospital or outside the hospital. I think the service standards is a cycle which needs to be maintained, and it cannot be done without adoption of technology. We may have the best of people within the hospital, but I don't think a complex operation like hospitals can provide a consistent, sustainable level of service quality unless they adopt technology, and adopt technology in a manner which is perceived by the patient and which can also be taken across a large cross section of a country like India. And fortunately, we are digitally well connected, and that makes it that much easier for us to enhance the service standards.
Perfect. So I think you highlighted the point of, continuous effective communication with the patient before they come to hospital, when they are in the hospital, and, after they leave the hospital. And in fact, you brought another important point of, the need of connected ecosystem of technology, which basically drives along with, people like all the basically doctors, nursing staff, etc. So, which basically, I think you're just bringing a very interesting aspect of, the engagement touch points. And the way I see this is a typical patient touches multiple engagement points in their journey of care. It could be a call center, hospital front desk, WhatsApp bot journey, website, hospital app, etc., right? And in fact, it's indeed really challenging to provide a seamless patient experience, right? Because let's say, I was trying to book an appointment for my daughter one day, and the bot was really not working, right? I really get frustrated. This is a broken experience. And then let's say if I got the appointment done using a WhatsApp bot provided by the hospital, and when I walk into the hospital, they are still asking for my appointment details. So and that goes back to your point, Dr. Hari, that, the need of a connected ecosystem, because a patient is touching multiple touch points, right, in the entire system of engagement, so that they have a seamless experience provided by the hospital. Because obviously they are in a bit of a trouble and they don't want, problems arising, or, they book the appointment and they walk into the hospital, they don't have any idea, etc., right? So according to you, what do you think? What are the typical challenges in terms of providing a seamless patient experience?
See, actually, the hospital healthcare borrowed this hospitality concept from the hotel industry. Basically, it came in from there. And in the past, we used to see a lot of operations managers who came from the hotel industry, and were setting up the systems and facilities. While it was good, the major challenge there was the variables are many more in a patient's journey than a journey of an individual who is occupying a hotel room, who comes and uses a hotel room. And each patient is unique. Unless we realize this difference, I don't think we would be able to satisfy the requirement of a good patient service in a healthcare space. There's a basic difference on that aspect. While the fundamentals can come from the hotel industry, it needs to be adopted to the healthcare industry, making sure that the variables which are there as a part of the healthcare industry, as a part of the clinical process which a patient goes through, it's not consistent. No patient you can draw a line and say this is the line which this is the part which the patient is going to go through. There could be many detours, and it could be multiple changes could happen in a patient's journey. So I think that variables need to come into effect, and the best way to do it, in my opinion, is uh, despite variables, a good system is one which, despite the variable factors, despite the unexpected things coming up, despite surprises coming up in a patient pathway, if we are able to still maintain the same sort of a emotional connect with the patient and make sure that the patient is feels at home during this journey with the variables, I think we would be doing a great job.
That's brilliant. So that's an interesting point. I think it brings uh, the importance of what we call in across the industry in the consulting world. We used to call it, the contextualization or the personalization. As you mentioned, Dr. Hari, I think every patient is unique in nature, and in fact, that makes it more interesting and in terms of what kind of experience they actually are expecting and how they're perceiving the experience which has been provided, right? So Vikram, what do you think? I mean, in terms of providing that personalized services, right, or a contextualized services to a patient who walks into your clinic, how difficult or easy it is, and what technology can play a role there based on your experience?
So the whole our own basis in terms of different. So in terms of differentiation, right? I mean, what is it that subcurrentist brings to the table that if other clinic cannot? And I think our entire basis is on patient experience and on technology which is being used over there. So when you talk about personalization, right? Personalization, we are able to personalize services at the same time, starting from engaging with the patient at the first point
Hmm.
to the kind of continuous engagement we have through our CRM systems, to the CRM system being back integrated into our HIS, which
Hmm.
further is integrated into our HMS system, and which further gets integrated into our continuous communication system throughout the journey of the patient, inside or outside of the clinic. At each point, we take, the data is shared across every possible uh, interface that the patient has with the brand or with the clinic, and that's why the patient feels that the brand knows that person, right? Brand exactly knows what he needs. How can the brand make the patient comfortable? And that has been one of our reasons of being successful, because otherwise, in terms of prognosis, it is an extremely lagging indicator, right? I mean, whether the treatment has been a good treatment or no, for the patient to know is extremely difficult. The person will actually know the quality of treatment possibly 3 or 4 years from the date of treatment. So whether it's a dental treatment or whether it's an hospital care, whether the work was done well or not by the clinical staff is something that the patient realizes years later. What he does note is during that particular period that he spent in the hospital, in the clinic, or during the treatment, what was the experience like? And this experience is more in terms of things that he can understand. As in, was he comfortable? Were the people associated with him comfortable? Was he able to understand what the clinical staff was talking? Did he pay properly? Was the payment smooth enough? Did the refunds happen on time? Did the
Yep.
exit happen on time? Was people in touch with him? Were people hearing him out? And this whole thing in our case is done because of the technology integration we have. Each of our modules are completely integrated. We use technology that is generally cross integratable in terms of having APIs, having systems that can be scaled horizontally as well as vertically, and that is extremely important in today's days and times. If you're not able to do that, then competing with others who have is going to be very difficult, especially at a time when you're looking at the other Ayushman Bharat being implemented, right?
Right,
So I
right.
think by October of the current year, it will be completely in implementation, which means that you walk into a hospital, you are expected to have an ABHA card. If you don't have an ABHA card, the hospital is going to arrange one for you. And then from that point onwards, the sharing of data, which is reports. So, for example, you have a CBCT or a diagnostic report that you've got it done at another center. The center
Mm,
will not be able to share it directly with the hospital. It has to go through the patient's consent, and it's going to
mm,
happen over the Aishran Bharat platform. So, all these integrations are going to be a challenge that are there currently and are present.
right.
Whoever addresses them first are the
Mm,
people who come out as winners, and
mm,
we are taking them very seriously.
mm, mm. So, I mean, that's a good point. So essentially, we are saying that technology is going to play a very, very critical role in terms of integrating all the touch points which a patient can touch before coming to the hospital or during the stay in the hospital or after leaving the hospital. Yeah. And of course there is a lot of work which needs to be done. Coming back to Dr. Ari, I think you mentioned about the uniqueness of each patient, right? And every patient, and there are so many variables which need to be managed in order to provide a satisfactory patient experience, right? Which means the measurement of this patient experience is extremely critical. And you touched upon the traditional way of measuring it using, say, NPS and CSAT methods, right? I think I'd love to understand what is your view in terms of measurement of this patient experience on a continuous basis, one, and two, how do you process these measurements, right? The learnings back into the feedback loop and probably consuming and processing that in a technology system, which continuously gives you an opportunity to improve and improve the patient experience.
Yeah, I think it is very important to keep this metric simple.
Mm-hmm.
I think the measurement of the metric should not be another burden on both the hospital and the patient, because it's not. Most of us don't welcome anything which is lengthy when we are asked for a feedback. So it
Right.
needs to be kept simple.
Yes.
And second thing is, it needs to give you the most important data.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing, and the third thing is, the data should be in a form where it could be utilized or analyzed on, and if possible, with the machine learning and artificial intelligence today, it should
Mm-hmm.
be able to throw up solutions rather than problems. Normally,
Right.
with the data we collect and the metrics that we use, we know the problem statement. But I think we are now fast moving into a stage where we get this data and we are actually be able to come out with solutions for the problem rather than just the problem
Problem.
statement.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the second part of it is, uh, when you take a simplistic measure like an NPS,
Mm-hmm.
and ask the patient whether how likely are you to recommend the hospital to others.
Right.
There are multiple factors which influence that decision. And
Mm-hmm.
it also depends on when you're asking that question. Now, if you
Exactly.
are asking that question while the patient is still undergoing treatment, you will get a different score.
Mm-hmm.
While you ask the question when the patient is just discharged, you'll get a different score. Two
Yep.
weeks later, you will get a different score.
Different score.
And there is
Exactly.
a reason for that. For
Yep.
example, one of the most we talked about integration of the processes and systems. I think
Right.
there's a huge need for technology integration. Because
Yeah.
one of the biggest pain points in a hospital is, as insurance sector is increasing, health insurance sector is penetrating more and more and more people are getting insured and coming to the hospitals. Today, almost in majority of the hospitals, 25, north of 25 to 30% of the patients are insured patients. And you know where the biggest challenge is? To get a final approval from the
Insurance.
insurance company or the TPA for the
Right.
final bill of the patient. It's
Yeah.
not in the hospital's
It's,
hands.
yeah.
It's not technology driven. It's done by some clerk or some doctor sitting in a TPA or a hospital, and
Yeah.
the time is not depend. And once the doctor tells the patient that you are fit for discharge, they want to get out of the hospital as soon as possible, and the hospital is unable to do it because they haven't got the approval from the TPA.
Yeah.
So I think this technology, apart from integrating the processes within the hospital and the hospital ecosystem, it needs to also integrate the others which are outside the hospital ecosystem to be
Mm-hmm.
able to deliver that sort of a seamless delivery. So if you ask the question of whether NPS question at the time of discharge and the patient is waited for 8 hours for the discharge,
It's
you're
going to be.
obviously going to get a lower score.
Yep.
right? So
Yeah.
I think there are multiple things which need to be looked at, and we are on the journey towards reaching a decent position. But I think there is still a distance to travel before we can say that we have reached a position where we can consistently and in a sustainable manner deliver the service standards and deliver to the expectations of a patient.
Absolutely. I think it makes a lot of sense in terms of integrating the external peripheral bodies to hospitals, which basically completes the patient journey because it doesn't end in the hospital. Actually, there are external dependencies which need to be tied back to the hospital and the patient to complete the journey in the smoothest possible manner. Because financially speaking, and in fact, there is a loss of revenue also for the hospitals because patient is just doing nothing. They're not being treated, but they're just waiting in the hospital to get the insurance clearance. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So in fact, Dr. Ree, you brought this interesting point of AI and the role which AI can play in the entire healthcare space, right? And in fact, I was just going through an article which talks about diabetic reversal program. And the way I understood this entire thing is, today doctors spending so much of time, their time in terms of analyzing the data, etc., right? And then basically counseling and advising the patient. But let's say AI can collect genomic data, metabolic data, or lifestyle data, pertaining to a huge number of patients, and then in AI engines can be run on such huge pool of complex data, right, and can generate insights which can be consumed by the doctors who are sitting in front of the patient, and they can actually focus on patient rather than the reports. And in fact, it ties back to the point of patient experience because they feel more attended, right? They feel more personalized, that and they can possibly their ability to relate with their problem statements, as in the problems which they have, they're talking about to be cured, and the advice which they are getting from the doctors, it improves, I think, significantly. So just would love to hear from both of you. Vikram, maybe Vikram, you can start. What do you think in terms of role AI can play? I mean, we are talking about every day in the newspaper, there is a coverage. So any reaction in terms of the meaningful application of AI, the meaningful application of AI in healthcare ecosystem?
So multiple areas. The one that is very commonly used in dentistry today is assistance and diagnostics. So
Mm-hmm.
most of our radiological tool come along with an AI assistant, which kind of marks the radiology output or the X-ray output with specific markers, which are indicators or guidance notes for the dentist to make some easy diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, on a clinical side, while we've not seen a lot of functional AI coming into play, but as data sources become larger, and one of
Mm-hmm.
the biggest problems with India is that because the digital data is not digital under
Right.
normal circumstances, and again because of a lack of a centrally integrated uh, backend infrastructure, whether it's a insurance section or whether it is the government of India's stack for healthcare data, because such a digitized platform is not available. Hence, we've not seen such a large use. But as and when this stack starts getting created, so I mentioned the Ayushman Bharat stack, which will start getting created October onwards.
Right. Right.
The amount of data that's going to be generated every day, both in terms of symbol HL6 codes of one or two lines, which have the entire diagnostic report, or all radiography reports in the form of the core file being uploaded onto the server.
Mm-hmm.
Querying it will become more and more simpler, and you
Right.
will have technologies helping you in diagnostics. Similarly, forecasting uh, patient flows, thereby increasing the way you could possibly increase the efficiency of the clinics, possibly even in the form of claim processing. So, Dr. Hari just mentioned that there's a person out there actually passing the final claim document and
Right.
manually doing that. The
Right.
easiest way to do it is kind of connected with some AI engine which kind of tries to solve the problem. So while all this is on the cards, as of now, I've not seen a lot of things being used in action
Mm-hmm.
uh, on an everyday basis. But let's say 2 years down the line, Who knows?
Hmm. Hmm. Dr. Hari, any perspective on the
I
usage
think,
of? Yeah.
yeah, AI is already playing a significant role on the clinical front.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it will in the future play a major role on the non-clinical front, that is the services front also.
Hmm.
I'll give you an example. Let's continue with the same NPS score. If you
Right.
take a hospital's NPS score and match it with the occupancy levels of the hospital, you'll find that the NPS score is the lowest when the hospital occupancy is high and is much better when the hospital occupancy is low. What all the hospitals, all of us do is we create a manpower plan based on the average occupancy of the hospital, right?
Right.
And there are going to be peaks and valleys.
Right.
And when there is a peak, this manpower is grossly inadequate to be able to
So,
service that,
yeah.
provide the same level of services to
Service.
the higher level of volume of patients. So I think once the data is fed in and there is a digitization happening and it is fed in a form which is readable by the machine, then it can throw up solutions in terms of what is your manpower requirement on a daily basis. And then
Right.
it could come down to an hourly basis. There are going to be lean hours even within a day. There are going to be peak hours even within a day. So it gives you multiple options in terms of it. I mean, it's very exciting to think of, imagine what AI could do once it comes into force. But for
Yeah.
that to happen, I think the most important thing is not only to make the clinical process digitized, but even make the service process digitized and integrate both of them.
All of
And
them.
that's when you will see the maximum value of AI being delivered to the patient. Ultimately, it's not for, it is not a fashion to talk about if AI,
Yeah.
if I may say so. It needs to ultimately impact the patient. It needs to impact it the patient in a positive manner.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I think we've been also meeting with many healthcare customer, and we heard something similar, Dr. Hari and Vikram. I think it's the amount of data, and it's also the quality of the data which gets generated, and then obviously we can have an application of AI and other models which can identify the pattern and possibly manage the situation which Dr. Hari just mentioned in terms of the peaks and valleys, right? So I think our ability to assess whether tomorrow we are going to have a peak, or week later we are going to have a valley, right? So that improves drastically, and hence your ability to basically respond to that business change or business situation on a particular day improves drastically, and your service level automatically improves because you are already prepared for it. So it's essentially the journey of data to insight to an action, which basically can be really propelled by an application of AI. I mean, that's how I'm just hearing from you, Dr. Hari and Vikram, on this. Super. And in fact, other than AI, I just want to share my own experience. And as I said, I mean, we have dozens of healthcare customers, and what we are also hearing in one common component of solution which they expect us to provide is that they talk about this patient 360, which is there is very less of AI here. Essentially, I mean, this comes from other industry also, let's say in insurance and even in lending world. This basically a customer 360. In fact, if you go to even building materials like a cement company, there we talk about dealer 360. Essentially, it's all about collating all the relevant information based on the various touch points. In the case of hospital, basically, let's say the patient is going to a website or patient is coming to hospital, how many times the patient has come. So and if there is a call center engagement with the patient, right, the ability of the person or agent who's talking to the patient improves drastically, and the quality of the conversation and the contextualization also improves drastically. If there is a flash of, say, patient 360, Preetham has come to this hospital on this day, this was the treatment which was done, right? And this was probably that can be paired with the NPS score which was collected post visit, right? So all that, let's say there was a poor NPS, the call center guy can possibly send a very maybe a small apology note, etc., which actually makes the experience really well because you connect with the person emotionally there, and then you feel good about it, right? These guys remember me at the end of the last time my experience was not so good. So I think this concept of patient 360, which essentially sources data from CRM, HIS, or EMR, and various other peripheral system, and the relevant information, the only relevant information can be provided to the personnel who was basically in turn talking to the patient, maybe at the time of appointment booking or answering any queries. So that's another experience which I'm having when I'm talking to our customers. In fact, there is another technology solution which people keep talking about. Again, this is more of a horizontal solution. It's called CDP, right? So, or patient data platform, if I can say so, right? Essentially, it's a next level of data segmentation. And let's say, in fact, one of the customers which was mentioning their use case, and they happen to be an eye clinic, right? And what they experienced is, there is certain set of basically customers. Uh, there is a certain set of patients basically who are having certain type of disease in a particular area, right? So let's say in one village of Chennai, there was a pattern identified that in a particular month, there are multiple patients who are having similar issues, right? So such patterns basically can be identified by segmenting the data using this customer CDP platform. And what you can do is, and again, it goes back to Dr. Hari's point, you can build your strategies, right, in order to take care of such situation that, you can actually forecast that in this particular month, in this particular area, you might have a situation like this where you need increased service levels, right? So the technology that way helps you basically react to such situations which are little seasonal in nature, local to a particular, maybe a region or a city or something like that, right? So that way, I think the combination of AI, the backend system, the system of records, HIS, EMR, all put together, and then it goes back to Dr. Hari's point again, and Vikram, what you mentioned, right? The need of the connected system, that's very important, which basically drives the better engagement with the patient.
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
and I have
mhm,
I have seen a lot of platforms coming up, CRM, patient platforms, whatever you call them. I mean, and a lot of people come and try and sell their solutions, which and the first thing they start off was by saying, this will save you so much of money, or this will increase your revenue by so much.
right.
So give us an opportunity. I mean, that puts me off, to be very honest. If you start off with the financial performance of the hospital and mix it up with the service standards, that's going to be counterproductive. You need to start off, any of these products need to first impact the patient positively, whether it's a clinical outcome or the patient satisfaction rate, whatever one of these two. And the
Right.
rest of the things will follow, whether you
Follow.
increase volumes, increase revenues, everything else follows.
Right.
And I'm just hoping that all these systems which are coming up and literally mushrooming across the country,
Right.
turn it around and say that this is the way we can send your patient home happier. This is the way we can keep you connected with your patient. This is the way we can keep your patient healthy. And then follow it up with, this is how your organization will benefit in terms of revenues, margins, or whatever it may be. That should be the sequence of things. And once that happens, I think a lot of these, technologies that are coming up will make more sense for the organizations and the community in general.
Perfect. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. And I think we can, if we get the serviceability part of the process managed, and I think the rest are byproducts and it'll follow automatically. Well said. I mentioned about, some horizontal solution, Vikram, which are getting used, let's say, in the lending industry or insurance industry. Do you think we can, since you have a bit of a technical bent, I'm just asking this question, do you think there can be a bit of a cross-pollination of learnings from other industry, which are more evolved in nature when it comes to serving the end customer or consumers? Because let's say when I'm going to buy an insurance policy or a loan, right, or if I'm a student, right? So there are industries which have, or organizations which have really matured in terms of, serving their customers. So Physics Wala is our customer, and in fact, we are doing a large engagement with them. And one of the business outcome which they are, well, let me not use the word business outcome. One of the outcome which they're expecting from this investment which they've chosen to make is improve the experience of the student, right? And similarly, we have customers in insurance space, some of the large logos we have from this. And I think most of the engagements which we are doing with our insurance and lending customers, there is a huge focus on similar matrices where we are talking about improving the customer experience. Any learning, Vikram, you think which we can leverage from other industry in healthcare space? While I understand, healthcare is very, very unique, as Dr. Hari mentioned in the beginning of the conversation, right? But do you still believe, there are possibilities of using, some learning from other industries?
I mean, I am a very strong believer that I've always been a very strong believer that healthcare needs to look at other industries for inputs in processes that are other than the clinical process. And, most people look at healthcare as something that a doctor does in a closed room to a patient, right? I mean, it's an industry that has processes that are much, much more than what just the clinical work of the doctor is. And your entire expectation or as a patient, or your entire brand image is not built on the basis of that particular engagement that the patient has, possibly under the effect of anesthesia in an operatory, because the person actually doesn't know. Now, then what is it that you can learn? So in our case, let's say for example, we take analogous examples or analogous learnings from very multiple, like from finalizing a location. So if you want to look for a location for putting up a clinic, we go and see how a cafe coffee day would have put up a location, how would a Apollo pharmacy put up a location, how would any retail business put up a location, right? And we have our metrics based exactly on the basis of how a retail business would look at location selection. That point, let's step aside. Let's say we look at the next step, that is acquisition of customers, right? So acquisition of customers or acquisition of patients is something that is actually a taboo, right? I mean, somebody talking about marketing in healthcare is generally kind of looked at in a very ill or not so great way. In fact, for us, the most important part is patient acquisition, because there is a very little awareness for preventive care, and we are focused on preventive care personally. So we do a
Right.
lot of marketing in that direction, and hence there is a need for an LMS that needs to be. If I required a lead management system in place, I need to look at other businesses which are more tech enabled. And since we look at largely the meta ecosystem for acquiring our customers, we have to look at systems like uh, a health tech or a ed tech business which kind of acquire leads through those sources. Post that, a CRM system that we use on the basis of the leads that we generate, and it's completely integrated with our lead management system. The CRM system is also something that's come into healthcare lately. In fact, I don't think most healthcare businesses don't even use a CRM at all. So it's one of the first things that you need in place. And the CRM then talking further with the HIS, thereby giving you opportunities of increasing revenue per patient,
Right.
increasing revenues per bed. So learnings across the entire life cycle of a patient or entire business cycle of healthcare, there are multiple learnings that come from other businesses. We've always looked at businesses outside of healthcare to get process improvements, as well as areas where we can improve our business. Our entire tech stack, which is completely in-house developed, is based on learnings from a Salesforce, from a SAP, from other technologies that exist to serve other businesses.
Perfect. So I think I absolutely concur what you said, Vikram. I think even before Lee Square, when I was in consulting world, I kept hearing these are like horizontal value generators. That's how I see this, right? I mean, it applies to multiple industries because it's more about consumer behavior, the way you understand the consumer behavior and your corresponding strategies to touch them emotionally, specifically in case of hospitals, as you mentioned in the beginning of the conversation. Perfect. Exciting conversation. Amazing. Loved this conversation, Dr. Hari and Vikram. Really appreciate this. And I think we are left with about 10 minutes. So, Shivani, if you're around, do you want to open some Q&A?
Yes, quite a few questions have been coming in. I'll dive straight into that. This is from Dhruv Sanghi, who is the director of DNS Hospitals Indore. He says, "Can you elaborate on metrics of patient? Can you elaborate on patient metrics for a healthcare facility to monitor and evaluate and thereby improve?" So essentially, what metrics should one cover to help with the improvement? Dr. Hari, if you could.
Yeah, okay. I mean, there is most hospitals are using one of these two, whether it's the CSAT or the NPS system, because those are simpler and easier, and makes a lot more sense for the hospital to get feedback from the patient, and it is easy for the patient to give. There are very few questions for them to answer. They don't get irritated answering a NPS questionnaire or a CSAT questionnaire. And then beyond that, what we've done is right through the discussion, we spoke about touch points. Now, the experience of multiple touch points combined together gives you a CSAT score or an NPS score. But the real value for you lies in the experience of at each of the touch points.
Yeah.
So there is in some of the hospitals, what we did was we put up a green, red, yellow sort of a thing for the patient to just press a button in terms of how satisfied are they with the services at that particular touch point. So that makes it easy, and that also gives you the information of what is happening at that particular touch point. It could be a billing, it could be a sample collection, it could be a radiology, it could be anywhere. And it's very simple and easy, but the back-end technology needs to help you to understand what's happening at each of these touch points and what are the corrective measures which could be taken. So it needs to be simplistic both for the patient and the organization, and it needs to give the organization enough information to be able to take corrective measures, and continuous improvement is the policy which needs to be adopted.
And
If that answers the question.
Yeah, Shivani, and I just wanted to add one more point. Rather repeat what Dr. Hari said earlier, and this is for Dhruv, that the timing of collecting this score, that is very important, right? So it needs to be timed well in order to get the real score. That's very important.
And in my opinion, my experience, that the best time to do it is at least 2 weeks after the patient has left the hospital, because there will be some sort of emotional normalization which would have happened from the different episodes that have happened in the hospital. It will not be biased by one episode or one touch point.
Absolutely.
So I think this also answers the next question that came in, was how to improve the response rate of the patients on NPS. So in a way, timing is one of the key areas. I'll take up Atul's question. Atul says, how do you develop a culture wherein every employee in your organization ensures that all of their efforts are directed towards creating a great experience for the most important entity, namely the patient?
Yeah. So, we've always believed that it is largely a function of how are the motivations or the incentives of every particular person across the organization aligned with the central goal, right? So, uh, we we've always kept a very large part of our variable components in terms of remunerations, or also as in terms of rewards and recognition programs, which are directed towards patient success, towards impacting several leading indicators rather than indicators that are typically results or outcomes. So we would typically link it with the average turnaround time, average time the person is on the chair, the amount of complaints that a patient, a number of complaints that a patient or a clinic receives, the Google review scores. So, if each and every person in the organization is working towards metrics that are aligned with patient satisfaction, generally, because the goals are aligned, because the motivations are aligned, you typically land up in having a culture that we'll definitely promote something that the gentleman here has questioned. But that's what we do, and we've seen substantial success there.
Okay. I think somebody had also asked about how many cities is Sabka Dentist in. So that had also come from Atul. Yeah.
So we are in Mumbai, Pune, Surat, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Baroda,
So
Nasik,
everywhere.
and Nagpur. Not everywhere. That's less than 0.5% of the country, I think.
Okay. I'll take up the next question. This had come through our earlier promotion that we did. I'm just pulling that up. With increasing use of digital content and means of communication with patient and families or decision makers, caregivers, what can a counselor or an organization do to ensure the personal touch for the patient is maintained? At the end of the day, that is what connects them psychologically to the service provider. Any thoughts there?
So we've always believed that we've reached a point of time where technology has taken over from that part of the business in healthcare where a person says that we are always connected to the doctor. So the whole family doctor thing is more of a passe, at least in the dentistry domain, because the average Indian goes to the dentist 4 times in a lifetime. This is the urban Indian, right? Now, if you're meeting a person four times in a lifetime and you call that person a friend, a foe, or a family doctor, I don't think that works that well, right? So effectively, you are connected with a person only if you are consuming some content from them, right?
Right.
It could be your Instagram feed for all that matters, or something that you're hearing on your X profiles, or something that you're hearing through other digital form of communication. Uh, Other than that, today, in today's days and times, and possibly 10 years from now, the next generation is going to be something that they see on their phone, that will make impression, on the basis of which the person is going to take a decision of whether the person should choose a particular doctor or a particular healthcare facility or a particular dental facility. So we are a very strong believer that this is a digital world and it's getting more digital as we move forward, and your identity is also supposed to be on the basis of the kind of content that you provide back to the patient. More than happy to hear what Dr. Hari has his view on that. Yeah.
I have a very strong view on this, and that is irrespective of what happens and in other segments, healthcare is always going to be human resource intensive
Yeah.
organization, and the touch is never, never, never going to go. The touch is always going to be a very, very important factor. And I'll give you an example from my own experience. We had introduced an HIS system and made it mandatory for all the doctors to use it in their outpatient settings. And the doctors, started typing whatever they said, whatever the patient said. And very soon we started getting very bad scores from the outpatient setting in terms of the patient satisfaction. And when it was analyzed, the reason was, when we did a root cause, the reason was the patients felt that the doctor was spending more time in busy typing on the computer than actually looking at him and talking to the patient.
Right.
So then we introduced the voice recognition software, and added a layer of AI on that. So that as the patient is conversing with the doctor in a normal manner without even having to key in anything, the relevant data is picked up and put into the system by
Yes.
this software, and immediately we could see that the patient satisfaction scores shooting up. So I genuinely believe that digitization has a role to play for sure. We're going to become more and more digitized, but the touch factor is always, always going to be a critical component in healthcare.
It's
Whether you
basically
call it a robot, whatever maybe you use, I think the touch factor is always going to be important.
it's going to be an assistant always. That's what Dr.
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. I think we've hit the 5 o'clock mark. To the audience, thank you so much for being a fabulous audience. I know you all wanted to get in touch with the speakers. So we have shared their LinkedIn profiles on the chat. You can reach out to them on LinkedIn. And thank you so much, Dr. Hari and Vikram, for taking us through the session and sharing your learnings with us. So I'll let Preetham sort of summarize the session, but thank you so much for being around with us.
No, we had a brilliant discussion. We were almost on time, but I think loved the conversation and interesting views. And look forward to see what AI is going to do and impact our care life. So yeah, looking forward to the role of AI in hospital, which is, in my view, is still at nascency. A lot to be explored as we conclude this discussion.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Preetham. Thank you, Dr. Hari.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
It was a fantastic experience. Thanks, man.
Thank you.